can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? Good. Good to see you all. It's funny, there's kind of a major piece to Buddhist teachings that I think is often overlooked and not really used or utilized or shared or taught enough in kind of a Western context with Buddhism. And that is the simple fact that the Buddha's life, he was a prince. Most people know that. Well, let me back up. If you're brand new to Buddhism or newer to Buddhism, maybe you didn't know that. But the Buddha was not like the big belly dude floating in the sky that often people think. Hate to break it to you, that big bellied statue is not even the Buddha, but that's a whole other topic. So it's kind of like finding out Santa Claus isn't real, or the Easter Bunny. In case you didn't know that, sorry for ruining that as well. I know, right? Sorry. That the Buddha was just a dude. He was a human. He was a person, and he was a prince, and he had everything: all the wealth, all the riches, all the women, everything you could imagine. And I tell this a lot. Almost every class I lead, I try to sprinkle that in there as a reminder, especially for those who are brand new, to let people know that he was just a person, no different than you or I. And he chose to leave that life, to become a homeless, wandering beggar. That's what he chose. So the entire body, and I'm not introducing this really so much to get into certain specifics of the Buddha's life. We can maybe get to that later. There's some questions around it. I bring this up more to point out that he chose a path of, or was born into a path of being a prince, and he chose to leave that to roam around India as a homeless wandering beggar and a spiritual guide. He chose that path. Now let's fast forward 2,500 years to today. Again, this is 500 years before Christ. And let's look at how most people, my master used to always teach about how to study Buddhism or how to practice Buddhism. And that was very important. Now, most people, and this is a generalization, so I'm always, running great risks when I make generalizations or say, something that maybe applies to my view of what a lot of people think. But my view of what a lot of people think is, as a crude example, someone today who's a prince would say, well, I want to learn about Buddhism because I want to be a better prince. I want to be a happier prince. I want to be a more peaceful prince. I want to be a prince and have everything, but then I want it to go smoothly and be okay with it all. And so what people tend to do in kind of a modern way of learning about Buddhism is they look at these very beautiful teachings and they try to, which is what I sit here and say week in and week out, integrate it into your already existing life, but very often lack the wisdom, knowledge, ability, effort, craving, desire to actually make change with your life. So this is a very delicate topic because it doesn't mean that when I introduce this that I'm suggesting that you, in whatever life you have, should completely uproot all of it, right? I mean, that was the path the Buddha chose. Very extreme. Prince, homeless, wandering beggar. Two complete extreme examples. So I'm not introducing it and suggesting that people make that type of change. That's not often very healthy or practical for most people, especially depending upon what stage you're on in your life. I don't know, I mean, maybe you're recently married and have 2 kids. You don't go to your intro to Buddhism class and then go home and say, you know what, I learned about Buddhism, so peace out. Right? I'm going to go cruise around India for a while. That's not the point. The point is to recognize, how do you live your life now? And are you happy? Are you at peace? And if not, it's important to understand that what you're doing has a big factor in that. So we could spend our whole life. Anyone here ever had a headache? I like show of hands things. It gets people engaged and keeps you awake, you know. When you have a headache, what do you typically do? Take a pill. And then what happens, hopefully, to the headache? Pill goes away. Pill goes away and the headache goes away. And then, how long does that last? Till the next headache. And when is the next headache very often? The next day? Is that what somebody said? Yeah, I was hoping somebody would say that, so I just want to make sure that's what was said. The next day. And then what do we do the next day? Repeat. Headache, take a pill, headache goes away. We're good till the next day. We take another pill, headache goes away. And we spend the next 17 years taking pills for headaches. This practice is about looking at what is causing the headache. And that's the part that I think so many people within a Western context of how Buddhism is practiced and introduced miss. Is that they're not really looking deep enough at what is the cause of this headache? What is the cause of your pain, of your suffering, of your sadness, of your depression, of your anxiety, of your stress? What is the cause of that? And early on, people take Buddhism and learn about Buddhism, and I get it. I mean, I was the same way. And we think that Buddhism is the pill that we're going to take. When what Buddhism really is the mirror, as most of you have heard me talk about a lot, that's helping us reflect back on ourselves that says, what is causing this headache? And when we can make that connection, and then look at, this is what the Buddha taught, and apply that to your life. If you apply Buddhist teachings to your life, you will absolutely change the way you live your life. It's impossible not to. It really is. If you really, I think Alex always, when Alex introduces the precepts, Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but he does it in a way where he says something like, and I'm sure he took this from somebody else, just like we all took it from somebody else, and now I'm taking it from Alex and trying to retell it. But he says something like, if you practice the precepts, the desire or craving for the things it's talking about goes away, or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah? Is that close? Yeah. So if you practice generosity and overcoming greed, if you practice compassion and overcoming anger, if you practice wisdom and overcoming ignorance, if you practice being less greedy, your life will change. Meaning what you do with your time will change. If you practice having more compassion towards others and less anger, how you spend your day will change. So if you practice these things and you begin to kind of open up what's the root that's causing this headache, then what you do on a day-to-day basis will drastically change. And if you change what you do on a day-to-day basis, now of course this is only if you're not perfectly at peace and happy. If you're perfectly at peace and happy and everything in your life is flawless and smooth and wonderful, then well, one, you probably wouldn't be here right now. But then this doesn't apply to you. But if you really do struggle, look at how you spend your day. And that takes work. That's not a simple thing. I think often people forget, and I'll close with this thought before we do meditation. Often people forget that even the Buddha in his life, and this is not even accounting for the fact that in the Hindu and Buddhist teachings, they talk about rebirth. So this is not even accounting for the fact that the teaching is that Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, had like thousands and thousands of rebirths prior to being reborn as Siddhartha. But let's just take his one life as Siddhartha, right? That even in that life, he left and he spent 6 years just roaming around the base of the Himalayan mountains in deep meditation, spiritual practices with great teachers. 6 years, like morning, afternoon, and night, every waking moment of his life for 6 years was committed to figuring out why he suffered. And then he still had to live his life. So most of our level of commitment isn't that deep, and it doesn't have to be. But I think it's important to learn to be truly honest with yourself and what causes your suffering and how you can make change so you don't spend your whole life suffering, because there's no need. I mean, whether you believe in rebirth or not doesn't really matter, because we have this life. And this is the life that matters. And your happiness, your peace of mind, a heart that loves or hates, that's what matters right now. So, all right. So with that, we'll start with a meditation practice. To all of our virtual YouTube fans, good morning. Nice to see you all here. Feel free to chime in and connect with each other as well. So with the meditation practice, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that's racing all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all this chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Same thing if you're on a bench or a chair, stomach sliding forward, shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. Most important, don't expect anything from this practice. If you're waiting for some deep realizations or magic moments to happen, you'll be pretty disappointed. We're just going to sit and you're going to breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is often very difficult. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's not a business. It's a way of life. It's a way of learning to sit, breathe, and be aware of what you think, say, and do. And this is what the Buddha taught for 45 years before he died. I believe that he truly wanted people to explore the nature of their own mind, understand why they suffer, and make changes in their life so they suffer less. That's it. To me, it's very simple. There's an expression in Buddhism that says he taught the same thing 84,000 ways. Or specifically, they say there's 84,000 paths within Buddhism, which often gets expressed or translated or explained in there's 84,000 ways to practice. And what that means is we're all different. We're all different people. Contrary to the kind of common New Age thing, we're not all one. No offense to those who think we're all one. We're all connected, but we're all very different individuals with different experiences, different thoughts, different ideas, different ways of being. And so the practice is to become aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do, and how that impacts those around you. And I think that the Buddha, when he was alive, saw, felt, and experienced tremendous suffering when he was a child, which started with his mother, who died at birth. A lot of people don't realize that. His mother died giving birth to him. So he never knew her. He was raised by his aunt. And there's a lot of stories of things that he witnessed that he saw tremendous pain as such a child. As simple as they were kids and shooting kind of like, slingshot style rocks at birds as 9-year-old kids playing. And the story is that one of the birds fell and he saw the bird and saw the bird suffering, and all of a sudden this overwhelming sense of compassion came over him. And for various reasons, he just was a child who had tremendous amount of awareness of pain and suffering in self and others. And when he became called the Buddha, he didn't become some mystical being. He was still just some person. And he wanted people to deeply explore why they suffer. And so for me as a practitioner who takes a lot of, it's always a challenge and a balance for me who learned Buddhism through Taiwanese cultural eyes and experiences, to then have that be my, I don't want to say upbringing, but in a way, my upbringing with Buddhism was through Taiwanese culture, Chinese culture, which are separate. And then to integrate that into my life, and then to share it with people with, for the most part, a different cultural experience and background. And this culture uses Buddhism very differently, which was what I started today talking about. So I think it's important to explore how we use it. And see how you can suffer less. So I think the last thing I'll say on that is, in Western cultures with Buddhism, US, Europe, Canada, as an example, we tend to use Buddhism like it's therapy, as it's one more piece to our therapy puzzle. I'm guessing at least half the people who've been coming to the Dharma Bum Temple for the last 15 years were referred here by a therapist. The other half of the people who are here are therapists referring people to come here. And I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of people in therapy and therapists, like, rock on, do it, stay on your meds, all that stuff. Right? I just want a little asterisk on record that I'm not telling you to stop your meds and stop therapy. Do all of that. Super important. And I know many of you, so I know a lot of you I know how you ended up here, right? And many of you who didn't get told to come here by a therapist now are in therapy because you realize you need therapy. So both are beautiful, therapy and Buddhist practice. But the real point I'm trying to make is that when you integrate Buddhism into your life, many of the things that people end up and continue to go to therapy for, your life changes. And therefore those issues, those concerns, those problems, those deeply rooted psychological traumatic pains dissipate because of this practice. So, just a different approach. So with that, I'll pause. Just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we use the rest of our brief time this morning for that. And again, for those who are joining virtually, welcome. Good to see you all. Feel free to chime in. There's a chat box there somewhere on your screen. And if you have questions, feel free to type them and I'll do my best to respond. So questions? Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I'm asking this right, but can you maybe talk about the difference between doing nothing and the concept of not doing?
So the question of, can I talk about the difference between doing nothing and the concept of not doing? That's your question? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's not really. For me, as you know, my background as a Zen Buddhist and Zen Buddhist practitioner, that really, it just permeates it. It is my life and everything that I do. It informs, it determines, it guides. Zen Buddhist practice is my master. And I am simply a humble servant to that path and that practice. And that practice really often gets seen at or interpreted at or explained at as doing nothing. But can you do nothing while doing everything? to me, is the real ultimate question. Because when we just hear the expression, again, whether you're brand new to Buddhism or been at this for 50 years, when we just hear the expression of doing nothing, that means different things to different people, but in many ways, it will most likely come across as if like doing nothing means we're just going to check out, throw in the towel, do nothing, right? So I can say for me as a practitioner, I've been working on doing nothing for the last 15 years. And, you know, there's on that side of the wall behind you, which would be tough to see, but in between the second to last art piece, the calligraphy there, is a piece from the Heart Sutra. And it says, form is precisely emptiness, emptiness is precisely form. And so this really gets into the emptiness teachings, emptiness practice, but that form and emptiness, nothing, everything, is all the same. The great teachings of Zen Master Dogen, and then say Suzuki Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki, the San Francisco Zen Center, his book Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, which I'm sure you've read probably multiple times and still trying to figure it out, as we all are, talks deeply about burning yourself completely and leaving no trace. And again, for those who might be new, asterisks here, I don't mean literally setting yourself on fire. Please do not go home and be like, hey, I went to this Buddhist class and the guy told me to like burn myself, right? Meaning just exhaust yourself completely in nothing but kind, compassionate, generous acts. And when you're done with all of that, have no recognition of anything you've just done, nor attachment to it whatsoever. Therefore, you've done nothing and everything all at the same time. So I love that practice because it removes one of the things that causes so much suffering in our lives, which is expectations. Most of our lives, we do things and we have some little kind of carrot dangling at the end of something that we expect from it. Some outcome, some result, some response, some give and take. And I get it when it comes to like relationships. Years ago I had a friend and they were, a couple, and they were both Buddhist, one more than the other. And, the one would always say that they hated arguing with this person because in arguments they would like play this Buddhist card and be like, I'm not Buddhist, I don't argue, and that's just nonsense. I mean, Tibetan Buddhism, like they debate. There's lots of communication, conflict, discourse back and forth. But can it be done without the attachment to ego, without the attachment to self, without the attachment to pride, without the attachment to expecting other people to be a certain way? So much of our lives, and you watch this today, when you leave here, even before you leave here, watch how little subtle things pop into your head about what you expect and want people to do all day long. It will happen when you're getting your shoes out of the little shoe cubby hole. Because someone is taking longer than you want them to, and they're standing right in front of your shoes. And are these things like life-threatening? Probably not. But if something like somebody in front of you not getting their shoes quick enough for you actually triggers you to be annoyed or frustrated, imagine what happens out there with things that actually matter. So you'll have subtle expectations from yourself and from others the rest of your day. Pay attention to those. And can we just exist without that? So, I mean, you knew there was no answer to your question, but there's just some thoughts. Yeah. Yes?
The apex of the conversation has been around.
I'm sorry, say it again louder.
I know the topic of conversation has kind of been around suffering.
Yeah.
And I had a question about kind of the opposite. Like, is there anything Buddha knows about why we look for the opposite of suffering outside of us, and why it's so hard for us to go in and find it?
So your question, I'm just going to repeat it for those joining virtually and as also, so I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your question is, there's a lot of talk and topics in the teaching around suffering, but is there any teaching or thoughts from the Buddha, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, on why we look for it outside of ourselves?
Why we look to ease the pain outside.
As opposed to going inside.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Like people or through drugs or whatever.
Yeah, addictions, cravings, desires.
Yeah.
I mean, the very simple answer to your question is yes. There's a lot of teachings around that. The entire practice is really based on, and this is a generalization first, a general response to your question. The entire practice is based on understanding why we are constantly seeking things outside of ourselves, as opposed to going inside. Everything is about that. But your real question is, why do we do that, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. At the heart of your question, what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong, is you asking, why is it so difficult for us to go inside? Would you agree with that?
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's...
No, it's a broad, it's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah. Okay, well, whether that applies to you or not, I'm going to go with that for a minute, right? It is often... there's a lot in Buddhist teachings around fear, and fear of reality, fear of ultimate truth. And a lot of ultimate truth and reality has to do with being very honest with ourselves and seeing ourselves differently from how we've perceived ourselves to be our entire life. So for anyone who's ever grown up and had anybody tell them they weren't good enough, they weren't smart enough, they weren't this enough, they weren't that enough, directly or indirectly, meaning maybe other individuals didn't mean for us to feel that way, but when we're 7 years old and someone says something to us, even though they might be meaning it in a positive way, we translate that as we're not good enough. And then that gets stuck in a 7-year-old's head. And then that continues on until they're 70, right? Those stories that we have told ourselves about ourselves are the reasons that it's so hard for us to look inside. Because when we look inside, all we see are the stories that we've intellectually and emotionally told ourselves our whole life. How many people spend their whole lives telling themselves how wonderful and beautiful they are? Anybody? I saw like a half a hand all the way in the back, Like most people just don't do that. We don't end up interested in Buddhism and meditation because we're perfectly happy and at peace and think we're beautiful, wonderful, kind people. Right? So a big part of this practice is to understand that we're afraid of actually recognizing that all these stories that we've told ourselves from what we've experienced, it's not true. But we don't have the strength, the courage, the wisdom to recognize that that's all an illusion. None of those stories that you told yourself are who you really are. So it's a lot easier to just go get high. It's a lot easier to go get drunk. It's a lot easier to turn to some craving, some addiction, some desire to take away the actual honest practice of being with yourself. Most people don't even like themselves. Why? Because they've told themselves stories their whole lives or have been told their whole lives about what terrible people they are. And after a while, we start to believe ourselves. So we could fight against our whole life story or just have somebody just, and when I say get us high, I mean whatever that thing is. Could be a relationship, could be alcohol, could be a drug, could be chocolate, could be whatever. We turn to something to be constantly short-term, immediately satisfied. And so we spend our whole lives seeking instant gratification. Why do you think Netflix is so popular? That's like instant gratification for 10 hours straight. But sit with yourself in silence for 10 hours straight. That's hell for most people. So it's just some thoughts. I don't know if that helps at all or addresses what you're asking, but yeah. Thanks. Good question. Other questions? Yeah.
I don't have a well-formed thought on this question, but that brought up the thought of, so that, you're talking about how the practice is being comfortable with yourself, and not seeking external sources of voter validation. But I also heard that a key core teaching is community and having wise friends and surround yourself with.
What was that last part? The last part I heard was I've also learned that this practice is, did you say community and surrounding yourself with wise friends? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How does that?
Yeah.
It seems a little contradictory.
Yeah, no, I get it. So again, just to repeat, and I'll paraphrase, but correct me if I'm wrong, your question is, so you're hearing a lot about how this practice is, learning to be comfortable with yourself and not relying on external sources, but that the practice also talks about community and having wise friends, and we call that Sangha. And so what you're saying is those seem kind of contradictory, right? Say again?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The Sangha, community, spiritual friends, wise friends, is absolutely critical on this journey. Otherwise, you're reading books and meditating by yourself, staring at a wall. And the same person that caused your suffering your entire life is the only person you're relying on to help you end your suffering. Right? That's not a good way to go. So I think I don't know if disconnect is the right word, but I think what maybe cuts through your kind of thought and question, which to me is where there's really no contradiction, is that the community, the Sangha, the spiritual friends, just like when the Buddha was, first started the Sangha, they were all there to practice together, to challenge each other, to hold each other accountable, but they also knew that none of them could alleviate the other person's suffering. So, not relying on others for your own happiness doesn't mean that you shouldn't have connections with other people. The challenge, I almost said the word danger, but I don't want to go that far. The challenge is, are these connections that you have or potentially have or we have with other people, are they healthy? Are they codependent? Are they toxic? Are they pleasant? Are they honest? So connections with other people, I mean, as you know, the beginning, we take refuge in the triple gem. Like, these are the three things that the entire body of Buddhist teachings are based on. And that is the triple gem. And I'll close with this thought. The first one is the Buddha, right? Bodhicitta. We're not praising him as if he's going to come back and save us. He died 2,500 years ago and he cannot help you at all. But we take refuge in bodhicitta, Buddha nature. Safety, comfort, protection, whatever refuge means to you. And the fact that we all are no different than the Buddha was. Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. We all have bodhicitta. We all have the ability to awaken. So we find safety, comfort, protection that we too can awaken and suffer less, just like the Buddha did. The second thing we take refuge in is the Dharma. And these are the teachings: loving kindness, compassion, joy, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. All these teachings that you read in every book and hear every Buddhist teacher talk about. That's the Dharma. The third jewel of the triple gem is the Sangha. So everything around Buddhist teachings is finding safety, comfort, protection in the community of people that you practice with. The additional challenge to that is, can you do all that without trying to attach to them, control them, manipulate them, expect anything from them. You ever had a healthy friendship or relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew that'd be a little bit difficult to answer. It is for most people, right? Have you ever had an unhealthy relationship or friendship? Yes, that's usually a lot easier for us to say yes to. But those two things, all we have to do is look at any point in our life where we had one person that we had a healthy, doesn't matter if it was like an intimate, partner relationship or just a friendship. There's healthy relationships and there's unhealthy relationships. And we typically know the difference between the two, regardless of how wrapped up or twisted we were in it. So think of spiritual friendship, Sangha community on this path as being sure to develop a healthy relationship, friendship with people on this journey. Does that make sense? Yeah. What I thought you were going to say, which I'll respond to briefly anyways, because you didn't say it, but it was in my head, and I think it's important for us to understand, is there's a Buddhist teaching that says to get to know the self, you have to get rid of the self, because the Buddhist teachings talks about non-self. This is where I thought you were going initially, was like in the non-self direction. It's, what's that? You said you knew better than to ask that? Yeah. So the idea around non-self teaching, just to touch on this, very briefly, because it's so simple to understand, is that in order to get to this place of non-self, you have to get to know the self before you can get rid of yourself. Meaning you have to get to know what is your ego, what is your pride, what are your attachments, what are your cravings, what are all the things that cause your suffering. You have to get to know that before you can remove that from your heart and mind. So you have to get to know what's unhealthy about you before you can just move beyond it. So, wasn't your question, but I still thought it might be good to share. So, all right. Anything else before we close? Did you have? I saw your hand. No, you're good. Okay. All right. So we'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you head out. And I just, Bridget put a comment on here. Dharma Bum Temple has awesome recovery programs. So just wanted to share that as well, which I'll touch on briefly. But and Bridget said, applying Buddhist principles to recovery are amazing. Shout out to Dharma Recovery. It's changed my life. So thanks for sharing that, Bridget. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners, no different than anybody else here, doing our best to take our understanding of Buddhism and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Different practices are led different night by different unenlightened folks sharing their approach to Buddhism. As Bridget referenced, we have a recovery Sangha we've had for about 12 years. So anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, that meets currently twice a week here. And then the other ones are online as well. We have a family Sangha that meets once a month. So parents, kids, toddlers, teens. Our college group, San Diego State, just started our 7th year. For those who don't know, 7 years ago, we started the nation's first and only Buddhist Fraternity at San Diego State. It's co-ed, of course. So imagine the Dharma Bum Temple on a college campus with college students. Leave it at that. They have the precepts down, I promise. All I tell the parents is, look, I don't know what your kids do when they're not with us, but I can tell you I know what they're doing about 6 hours a week. Other than that, they're on their own. But So that's a phenomenal group. Yeah, I think that's about it. It's nice to be open. Day of Silence once a month for Saturday of every month. That does require an RSVP still, so that's on the website. Buddhist is open downstairs if you need anything. Kira, is that you in the back? Okay. There's a huge glare, and so I can't really see past like 3 rows, but I wanted to make sure before I said, anybody who wants to help outside, we could use some watering, definitely some sweeping as the palms or trees are falling. It's a mess out in front again. So anyone who wants to like fast track themselves to enlightenment, you can help water and sweep. It really is the quickest way to end suffering. It's the deep esoteric teachings of Buddhism that we're not usually allowed to share, but it's Saturday, so I figured I'd share the news with you all. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And yeah, be well. And if you just meet Kara out front, she'll give you some enlightened task to do.